In class today, we talked about CRC cards, and I was really happy to see the progress that a lot of people were making. I thought it might be useful for me to go through a little bit of a CRC analysis myself. So let me tell you about first, how do I start getting into it? I look at the user stories, and the user stories are organized in priority order. So while it's true that at some point we're going to deal with frequencies of words and we're going to deal with blacklists, I'm not even going to worry about that yet. Right? The goal of the CRC analysis is to lay kind of a framework out in which you can work. And because we're using an agile approach and we're constantly refactoring, none of that is set in stone. It's all going to change. So I'm not going to pretend that I can correctly analyze this whole thing. That starts to sound like big design up front. Instead, I'm going to focus with just this first story. Let me see if I can make the best solution I can to this story. And if I can always add to it. So right, this also is generic, right? The user story doesn't tell us who this person actually is, but as we approach the CRC analysis, it's helpful to give this person some kind of an identity. In user interface design, sometimes this is called a persona. So let's call this person Nancy. Nancy is a citizen journalist, and she wants to use our application. So let me head over to my drawings here. CRC cards, of course, are best on paper. You get a group of people together and you have these on paper, and everybody has a pencil or a marker, and you can pass them around and cross things out, and they're easy to throw away. Now, that is not something I can very easily replicate here on my screencast, so I'm using a Google drawing program. It's not ideal, but I think it'll give you a good enough picture. So, all right, back to it. So Nancy, I think is what we call our user, she sits down at the computer and she launches our application. And the first thing she does is she chooses the arts and culture feed from a combo box, and then that shows the result of that feed. So in that little story, right, it's probably just one long sentence. A lot of new ideas were introduced. So we've got this idea that there's a feed selection combo box. So what does this do? It presents all available feeds, and it allows selection of a feed. Allows, I don't really like that. So let's see, when a feed is selected, now remember the next part of the story. She selects a feed, and then it shows that feed's data in where? In a, I don't know. So show the feed data in a, let's call it a news item. So that tells us we're going to have some collaborator here called news item. And so I've got the little template here I'll stamp out. All right, so here's another card. This is going to be a news item. So this is still in the user interface. It's simply responsible for present a news item from a feed. Kind of a problem there. This is just a single news item, but we're actually dealing with a list of news items, right? The feed is going to give us a whole bunch of news items. So maybe I have another thing in between here. I'll just drop that in here, and we'll call this a news list. So this will simply aggregate news items to show all the news in a feed. Gee, maybe a better name for that then would be feed item. So then we have this sends the data to a feed item, and so this is a feed item. Oh, you know what? Feed view. Make it more obvious. This is a feed view. This communicates with a feed view. These are news. Oh, that was right. News items. Yeah, so this can be a news item view. Here we go. All right, I think that's all up to date. With multiple people, of course, people could be picking up cards and writing on them and rewriting things and clarifying. I'm just trying to give you a sense of it. So feed views, it aggregates these news item views. Okay, so this gives us some sense of what our user experience is like. These are all sort of view level ideas. But of course, the data actually comes from the internet, right? It's not the case that I can just click on this combo box and suddenly it has data. There has to be another agent. Somebody has to go out and fetch that RSS data, and then we have to do something with that data. So let's start with the fetching. So let's see. We need an agent that will go out and get the RSS data. So let's call this a news collector. I don't like that. Fetcher, maybe. Yeah, we can always rename it, right? So this is responsible for, given a URL, load the RSS XML for that feed. Given a URL that is an URL to an RSS feed. Okay. So really what's going to happen is when I click on this, it's going to create a news fetcher that's going to go get that XML data, which I don't really have to write a class for, but maybe I will anyway. So there's this idea from XML of a document. So this is the actual RSS data. And I'm not going to need to write my own class for this because any XML parser is going to be able to give us this through its standard API. But this news fetcher then will create an XML document. And so this, of course, is going to use some of the Java networking APIs. So maybe I'll mention that here too. It's going to actually reach out to the network, pull up this document. But the document itself is just structured data. You remember what that looks like, right? It's just a bunch of XML. We don't want to hand that big XML blob over to the feed view. Why not? Because then the feed view would have to have the responsibility of parsing the XML, but that's not a view level idea. That's a model level idea. So we'll make another one, another class here. We'll call it the Rss Parser, and its job will be to parse the XML document into a list of news items. Right, so take this big monolithic blob of data, which is the XML document, and produce for us a feed, a list of news items. So we'll need something called a news item. Let's see, I'll stick that over here. This will be a news item. So whereas this up here is a view, this is probably a label or something in JavaFX or Swing that shows us the news item. This is actually the news item itself. So, well, let's see. Let's check that specification. Title and description is what we need. Yeah, there's nothing else here like timestamps or anything, so we'll just do title and description. Let's see. So this will be hold the title, or know the title. Maybe you want to say know the item title, and know a description. So those will become accessible through here, probably through some accessor methods or by making them public final or something, depending on the rest of the design. That's an implementation level detail, so I'm not worried about that here. But let's see. So what do we end up with for a flow? Now this is where being able to lay them all out on a big table would be great, but I'm kind of stuck in this little window. So I launched the application. You know what we need? We need the application. What do we call this thing? Let's call it the RSS. Let's call it the News Analyzer application. That's a nice name. And this will be responsible for construct the UI. All right, so we launch the News Analyzer application. It creates my user interface that has these feed selection combo boxes in it. And so I go over here, I click on Arts and Culture. Now remember, actually it's not me, it's what do we call her? Nancy? So this whole thing is really going back to Nancy. Nancy launches this. She clicks on Arts and Culture. What that will do is, well, it's true that this shows the feed data in feed view, but that's indirect. What this is going to do is when the feed is selected, make a request through news fetcher then populate feed view. So this is going to talk to, let's see, news fetcher, which is not a great name. We can call that something else, but hey, here we are. So we select Arts and Culture. Nancy selects Arts and Culture. It goes down to news fetcher. We're handing this the URL because we know the URL for the feed. Do we know the URL for the feed? Let's make a data structure called feed info, and this can know the name of the feed and the URL of the feed. Here we go. So, given this feed info, we can make a feed selection combo box. Great. Okay, we select arts and culture. Feed info knows what its URL is. We hand the URL to NewsFetcher. NewsFetcher uses the networking APIs to grab an XML document off of the internet. We hand that document to our RSS parser, which parses it into a list of news items. We hand that list of news items back to here, right? This is what started that request. So this is actually going to deal with news item, probably in a list. Maybe I'll say a list of news item. That's the answer, right? That's what NewsFetcher gives us back after this whole thing is done. So NewsFetcher gives us back a list of news items. We hand those list of news items to a feed view, which then populates itself with individual news item views. And that is my first pass at a CRC analysis for solving the first user story of that project. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave comments.